In the series, your package, there were also several videos and also images that accompanied this package. How did you work collaboratively with the visual team at AP? Can one of you, Julie, or Lori, how do you?
Well, we had Renata Brito, who is the third person on the story, was the videographer, and there is never really a distinction among us, particularly when working in a team. And I've worked with Renata on a few different stories involving migrants. She is based in Spain and was on one of the NGO rescue boats. And so was really kind of in the middle of, she was in the middle of the sea for weeks on end, watching this tug of war between the Libyan Coast Guard, which is supposed to intercept them, and the international NGOs, which are trying to keep them from drowning. So it's a real, you really get that tension, and Renata was able to get the phone numbers and stories behind these people and who were just out of Libya, so who had just escaped this horrific situation. And to have the visuals of the moment when they have gotten out of it is just an incredibly powerful moment, because it's the relief on their faces when they know they're not going back to Libya is just extraordinary. And almost all of them said anyone would do anything to get out of there, which really gives you a sense of the desperation. So in terms of the working with her, when she was on the boat, it was, every time she had a signal, we were speaking in the evenings, and that was to try to get a sense of where things stood on the ocean as well as on the land, both in Europe and in North Africa. It was just a crucial part of the story.
Farnaz, do you think this is a good time to start the question and answer? It's 12:30.
Sure, absolutely.
So people can submit questions via the question and answer icon, and then Chad will unmute the person to ask the question themselves. So Chad, can you do that now?
Yes, I'm standing by if anybody has a question.
Okay, so maybe you could continue the conversation for a couple minutes, and we'll see if if questions come in.
I want to ask you about the impact of your work and the reaction that you got from officials, from aid agencies.
I know on my piece about the doctors, they said they got a huge impact of people more health officials wanting to help out, and they said they got quite a big response in that way.
That's nice. Tim?
And I've had people reach out to try to, who wanted to connect with these people or to donate to the shelter, especially in Mexico. I mean, the sad thing is that there's no government response. I mean, you don't get the impression that that they're listening very hard.
Right. But I'm sure they're reading it closely.
Hopefully. I hope so.
Lori?
For us, it was the biggest response was UNHCR changing their policy on how they give out the money that comes from the EU in order to trace it more carefully, in order to try to make sure that it's being used to protect migrants. The main question is, given the chaos that Tripoli fell into, the even further chaos that Tripoli fell into, how much is that actually happening? It's hard to say, but it is. What does seem clear is that the particularly since that time, the money is now more going directly to migrants, and you can argue that it's insufficient or sufficient, but there is an attempt to try to keep the money from falling into the hands of the same people who are responsible for torture and for trafficking. Libya is a complicated place, so it's not. I don't think anything is perfect. But there was a definite awareness that there needed to be more oversight.
Thank you. Do we have a question, Chad?
At the moment, we have no questions lined up.
So I will continue until there are questions. In a way, it seems like a big news organization like the Associated Press is very uniquely positioned to carry out a global investigation like this, because you have reporters and stringers and teams in many countries that other news organizations don't have. How much of a collaboration was there between the core team of this project and your local AP staff in these countries?
I guess I am local. So for me, I was just going over the border. So,
like your bureau in Mexico, were there?
Oh, yeah. And I used to be based in Mexico, so I always coordinate with them almost, yeah, weekly. Yeah.
And I actually turned to Julie when I was having trouble finding people in Honduras to help me out. Julie has spent so much time in Mexico and Central America that she was able to put me in touch with some good people who were able to point me in the right direction. I mean, we are this sprawling organization, and it gives us, you know, the ability to reach into places that you wouldn't necessarily be able to.
Exactly, right.
Yeah, and I would say that we, to add to that, we do kind of coordinate just as part of our natural, it's almost become natural now. And I think that is something that's come about over time in the AP, but I feel like it seems like a normal thing to reach out to different people in different places when you need them for stories and to develop ideas.
Is this theme of looking at migration something that you're taking forward and working on as an ongoing project? Lori?
Well, I think it's, I mean, as a theme, it's essentially inescapable because so many people in the world are on the move, and because a big chunk of any government's policy is how do you deal with newcomers, whether it's new citizens or whether it's people who want to move there. I mean, that's essentially fundamental. It's where security policy and human rights intersect. And you know, the definition of a nation is one that controls its own borders. It is having borders. If you don't have borders, you're a state, or you're a city, but you're not a nation. So the question is, what do those borders mean? And I don't think that the question is going to go away. Certainly the debate hasn't. In Europe, they're still trying to figure out whether they can come up with a unified migration policy. And I think in the United States, no matter what administration takes over this coming year or in subsequent years, it's a really fundamental question of how do you define yourself as a nation? So you have to, do you do it in opposition to others, or do you do it by bringing others in? And it's a question that goes to the heart of how any country views itself.